What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. I've got my Week 12 wide receiver rankings here for you, my top 30 for this week, and then watch till the very end, because then when we get to the very end, I'll cover some notable players that were not included in the top 30. So, keep in mind, Thanksgiving Day, we're down from 3 games now to 2, with Baltimore and Pittsburgh being delayed and moving back to Sunday. A good and a bad thing, maybe. Obviously, on Thanksgiving Day, hey, love to lounge around and watch some football. So unfortunately, we're not going to have anything on Thanksgiving night to watch. But now that gives us a little bit more time to plan for this week. And it also gives us some potential more options that we don't have to try and shove into our lineup right away on Thursday, hoping to, maybe not get somebody or get somebody that may or may not be healthy on Sunday. Whatever it may be, it kind of does help a little bit when it comes to setting our lineups. However, let's get into the top 30 right now, starting at number 30, working our way all the way up to number 1. First and foremost, Mr. Darius Slayton coming in at number 30. Now, they're coming off the bye right now, but it was good to see him kind of get back in the saddle a couple of weeks ago against the Philadelphia Eagles. Since Sterling Shepard had come back, some of the big playability, some of the targets, some of the volume had kind of left Darius Slayton. So watching him go 7.5, 93 a couple of weeks ago was really good to see. Now, I want to see him get back in that touchdown category. He's only got 3 touchdowns this week. My concern about Cincinnati and New York this week is that with the different QB now under center for Cincinnati, it's not going to be Joe Burrow, of course, with the knee injury. But, what if New York gets out in front of Cincinnati fairly early and they run the ball a little bit more? Well, considering the injuries at the running back position and the fact that really New York has been inconsistent as well, my hope is that Darius Slayton has a really good week this week against Cincinnati. At number 29, Curtis Samuel. I mentioned Curtis Samuel in my wide receiver start and sit video, and I said we need to go ahead and move forward with him as a start. Now, when Christian McCaffrey comes back, that may change things a little bit, but Curtis Samuel has been a stud, really, over the last few weeks. Since week 7, he's actually the wide receiver 5 with 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. Back when Christian McCaffrey went down with the injury, I did a video on our Patreon, channel, our exclusive channel for subscribers, and I talked about Curtis Samuel and what made him a dynamic player and why he could fit some of what Christian McCaffrey didn't do. Well, Mike Davis came out and balled out the first 3 weeks after that injury, but since then has been fairly quiet for the most part, and we've seen some of those touchdowns now go to Curtis Samuel. They're using him all over the field exactly like they should have been. It has hurt Robbie Anderson a little bit. That's why you don't see him in the top 30 right now, but I like how they're using Curtis Samuel, and I hope they do that moving forward. Devontae Parker at number 28. For Devontae Parker, Tua is going to be the starter this week, and Devontae Parker has at least 7 targets over the last 3 games, and I expect Tua to come out, be aggressive, want to show why he was still a top 5 pick even after the injury. He's been shaking off a little bit of rust, and yeah, they pulled him last week because of his performance, but going forward, maybe he doesn't have the most upside in the world, but as long as he can still get some targets over to Parker, he'll end up being just fine. At number 27, DJ Chark. Yep, Jacksonville's coming off a very disappointing week last week, obviously. Thought they might put up a little bit more of an effort against Pittsburgh. That just didn't happen. However, when you look at the Cleveland Browns, they've looked like they've been doing a lot better against the pass over the last several weeks when it comes to keeping fantasy wide receivers off the board. But that just, that's contributed to a few other things. Over the last 4 weeks, the Cleveland Browns are averaging 19.27 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That is the lowest amount in the league. But over that time frame as well, they have played 3 games in which the weather has been absolutely awful. Whether it be rain, whether it be cold, whether it be wind, whatever it may be, during that time, it has been absolutely awful. Now they get to go to Jacksonville. And if they go to Jacksonville and the weather, hopefully, fingers crossed, is good for them, that could lead to maybe a little bit of a rebound for this team, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm not betting on too much here. It does look like there's about a 60% chance of rain. 74 is the high. Wind probably isn't going to be too bad. It looks like it's supposed to be about 8 miles per hour or so. So that's a lot better than what they've been going over the last couple of weeks. So DJ Chark, maybe some of that upside has disappeared over the last few weeks from what it was at the beginning of the season with Gardner Minshew. But I'm still going to say this is a guy that, because of his big playability, could land in the top 30. Brandon Cooks at number 26. Brandon Cooks this week, 100%. Hopefully he's bouncing back as well. But he was, he's been kind of caught up in those games too where it hasn't just been great weather. Obviously facing the Cleveland Browns a couple of weeks ago. Then he gets New England. New England, they're still pretty decent against the pass, only about 85 yards. But outside of that big game against Jacksonville in week 5 where he went 161 yards and a touchdown, he hasn't broken 100 yards since then. Actually, his 85 yards last week against New England was the best. But this is a Detroit team, let's just face it, sucks. That's how Detroit is. They are not that good, and they're going to be missing Jeff Okudah this week as well. So that only helps Will Fuller, and that only helps Brandon Cooks as well. Number 25, Mike Evans, coming off a decent Monday night performance. Some of the upside from these Tampa Bay wide receivers may or may not be limited because the ball's being spread around so much. But I'm still going to put 2 of the 3 at least in the top 30 this week, going with Mike Evans at number 25. The hope with Mike Evans is that if you are playing him, that he scores a touchdown. Okay, it's as simple as that. Your hope is that he scores a touchdown. That's kind of what it has been so far with Antonio Brown being there. And this week, Kansas City obviously allows some big plays, so they could allow a touchdown or 2 to him. I'm going to have him at 25 just because I think the floor is still a little bit lower with him, but obviously that upside will be there every single week. Kind of the same thing with Chase Claypool. That floor is going to be a little bit lower than some other guys, but he's going to have some decent ceiling to go with him. If these guys were in an offense that maybe didn't spread the ball around so much, things would be a lot better for him. But again, these 2 are guys high upside. Hopefully they score the touchdown. Hopefully they get the big play, and that really will help them out. Michael Pittman Jr. at number 23. I love the way Michael Pittman was used by the Colts last week. Absolutely love it. Over the last 3 weeks, he's gotten a start each of the last 3 weeks in 9, 10, and 11. 7 targets in week 9, 8 in week 10, only 3 last week, but again, a little bit of a tougher matchup in the passing game. But he scores his first career touchdown last week. And what you saw on a couple of the plays that he had that were big plays is really anybody that was on the field that was considered a pass catcher at that point. Anybody on the field, they were sent straight down the field toward the end zone. Go. Just run, go routes down the field. What happens? Everybody gets pulled down the field. The defense gets pulled down the field because the Colts were running the football particularly well with Jonathan Taylor last week. The defense still has to give him a decent, amount of looks there and stay up in the box so he doesn't get any big plays. Pittman just kind of slips around the edge, just a nice little crossing route over the middle. Boom, Phillip Rivers to him, and he goes down the field. And because he's such a great athlete, he has all this room to run. And when you've got room like that to run, you can make plays happen. And that is exactly what he did. On the touchdown pass, there was another play that was almost exactly like it as well. So really good to see him getting set up like that, because if they can continue to do that for him, he's definitely a guy that can give you fantasy value every single week. And I brought him up in the waiver wire show. I did mention to everybody about potentially picking him up and using him. Hopefully you were able to grab him if he was out there. He's the wide receiver 17 over the last 3 weeks. He is going to be a guy that is going to help some fantasy owners down the stretch. Number 22, Amari Cooper. Not a whole lot of upside this week. Washington does do a good job against the pass in terms of allowing fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Right now, they allow the fewest in the league at 29.09 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So I've got him lower this week, but he's still a guy that's getting so much volume, we're going to play him. At number 21, Allen Robinson. One of the big things about Allen Robinson right now is waiting to see what happens with the quarterback situation. Allen Robinson is also waiting to know who's going to be his quarterback this week. Both Foles and Trubisky are banged up. Is it going to be a third stringer? Is Trubisky going to be able to get out on the field? What's going to happen? Keep an eye on it. Right now, I have Allen Robinson as a sit, but I am going to put him here at about 21. We're going to wait and see what happens with him. That is going to be very important this week to know what happens with the quarterbacks. Let's move into 11 through 20, and at number 20, it's going to be Julio Jones. My concern with Julio Jones is that if he does play this week, is he just going to be a decoy, and is that hammy going to be healthy enough? More than likely, if you own Julio Jones, you're going to still try to play him this week if he ends up being active. My hope is they just don't have him active. We don't have to worry about what he's going to end up doing, and we just move on to better options. Number 19, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is going to be a guy that's going to see a good amount of volume. I mean, him and Antonio Brown, I think, are going to be the two guys that see the volume. And the hope is that Chris Godwin scores along with that volume. If he doesn't, in PPR and half PPR leagues, he's probably only about a solid wide receiver 2 based on the volume alone. If he can start scoring some touchdowns along with that volume, then we see him creep up into that high wide receiver 2, maybe low wide receiver 1 type of stats. At number 18, Deontay Johnson. You know, I've told you all for several weeks. If Deontay Johnson is healthy, you play Deontay Johnson. That's just kind of how it is. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I did kind of move away from that, and I got worried because of the weather there. Shouldn't have done it. But with that being said, over the last 3 games, 10, 11, and 16 targets. And actually, if you toss out his week 8 performance against Baltimore, when he kind of came up a little bit lame, had some issues there. In week 7, he had 15 targets. So in 4 of the last 5 games, the dude has at least 10 targets. That's some of the tops in the league. Back-to-back games of 100 yards. Again, we kind of put him here in this 18 range because if he goes 12 catches for 111 yards, like in a half PPR format, that's going to put you about wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. Because again, if it's not full PPR, you're losing, on that game right there, you're losing 6 points because it's half PPR, not full PPR. So it's going to put you right around that area. If he scores that touchdown, though, that's what gets you more into that wide receiver 1 status. But because of Juju, because of Chase Claypool, because of Eric Ebron, because of running the football, Deontay Johnson still goes at about 18 for me. At number 17, DJ Moore. Again, the big plays are what is kind of propping up DJ Moore right now. But they're utilizing it well. And heck, if you're utilizing something well, that's great. I mean, in 3 of his last 4 games, he's above 90 yards. That's what we got to see. His 11 targets in week 11 was the third time this season that he's had at least double-digit targets. So hopefully they're starting to give him more and more and more of those opportunities, especially when you look at the yards per target. That's the indicating factor to me that they're starting to open up DJ a little bit more in this offense. I mean, in some of his worst games this year, his yards per target were 9.7, 6, 8.17, 9.23 and 1, 6. But when you look at the games where he had really good games, he's at 11.55. He's at 13.71. He's at 18.6. He's at 18.6. He's at 16.25. So giving him those yards per target and getting him up closer to that 12 to 13 mark, if not higher than that, is allowing him those big play ability, or it's showing that big play ability there. And again, that's yards per target, not necessarily yards per reception. So that to me is a little bit better of an indicator that they're targeting him a little bit deeper down the field. And it's not just, oh, hey, he catches this ball and he breaks off a big play. They're actually trying to target him all over the field and give him an opportunity for that big play. At number 16, Robert Woods, and at number 15, Cooper Kupp. Glad to see both of these guys bounce back huge last week. Not a whole lot of people expected it, especially with how they've kind of been playing, but it's definitely shown that Cooper Kupp, they are trying to force the ball to him. And not necessarily force the ball to him. Because that is kind of a negative connotation right there. But get the ball to him. Target him more. Make it a part of the game plan to get Cooper Kupp more involved in the passing game, which is really what they need to do. Because when Cooper Kupp is going, this offense is going. I mean, take a look at it. Over the last 3 weeks, he's got a game with 20 targets and he's got a game with 13 targets. That's what we need to see from Cooper Kupp. Not necessarily 20, 13 targets every game, but we need to get him closer to 10 targets a game. If we can do that, then he definitely is a more set in stone, must start every single week instead of saying to each other, oh man, is this the week Cooper Kupp bombs it and gives me, 50 yards on 5 receptions, or 11 yards on 3 receptions, or 66 yards on 5 receptions, right? We want to get a little bit more towards that upside. And of course, Robert Woods, yeah, maybe he's not seeing the type of targets that Cooper Kupp is seeing, but the thing about Woods is he's doing a little bit more with less. He ended up having 15 targets last game, which was great, but he's also been the guy that has, he's getting the touchdowns a little bit more than what Cooper Kupp is, and that was only his second game with that's only his second game with double-digit targets this season. So again, he's doing a little bit more with less, but he does have 2 touchdowns over his last 3 games, and, the touchdowns are helping a little bit because we haven't seen, we've only got 200-yard games out of him. The hope is that we get more moving forward. Against San Francisco, both of these guys have the opportunity to go over 100 yards. At number 14, Justin Jefferson. This ranking kind of depends on Adam Thielen a little bit. We're still kind of waiting to hear on him, and I'll talk about him a little bit more. But the thing you see with Justin Jefferson, he's Kirk Cousins' go-to big play guy right now. Yes, Adam Thielen is dominating the touchdowns. Yes, Adam Thielen is dominating in the red zone. But if they're not in the red zone, the number one guy is Justin Jefferson on that offense. It is not Adam Thielen. If you watch the tape, Justin Jefferson is the guy that they are expecting to make the big plays when they are not inside the 20. Tyler Lockett at number 13. Again, Tyler Lockett, he's our boom or bust guy. All right, he's our boom or bust guy. We definitely want to see a lot more boom out of him than what we have been seeing. Unfortunately, DK Metcalf, has a way of kind of limiting upside for guys every once in a while because of how good he is. But Tyler Lockett is kind of a great, I don't want to say he's second fiddle to DK Metcalf because sometimes he plays like he's the wide receiver 1, right? So with Tyler Lockett, we put him in our lineup every single week and we just cross our fingers, man. And that's why it's good to have a true set-in-stone wide receiver 1 for him. But over the last couple of weeks, 9 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Last week caught all 9 of his targets for 67 yards. So his yards per reception was down, but his yards per target haven't really changed too much. Yes, we got it back up towards 7 because, from weeks 4 through 7, it was 9, 8, 10 in that area. Then it dropped down to 6 and it dropped down to 5, 2 of the lowest of the season. But then we get him back up towards 7 over the last couple of weeks. And obviously he's been playing a lot better since then. 2 games this year with 3 touchdowns. In both of those games, those are the only game with 100 yards. So again, those points are coming in bunches. And against Philadelphia, 100% could come in bunches again. A.J. Brown at number 12 with A.J. Brown. Yeah, kind of let us down last week, obviously, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago. But, bounces back last week. Looks a lot better last week. And again, kind of the same thing with him. He's going to be a little inconsistent at times. But the thing about A.J. Brown and Tyler Lockett, the difference is that A.J. Brown is a little bit more of a physical wide receiver than what Tyler Lockett is. Obviously, these two are not built the same. But A.J. Brown is the number 1 wide receiver set in stone on his team. If A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf played together, I think you would see a little bit from A.J. Brown what you see from Tyler Lockett, where it can be points come in bunches. But because A.J. Brown is the guy there in Tennessee, he's getting more touchdowns. It's allowing him to be a little bit more consistent. Again, I'm not saying A.J. Brown and Tyler Lockett are the same in terms of their physicality or who they are as a player. It's kind of how they produce. And Ryan Tannehill, he's just as much to blame there. If A.J. Brown had Russell Wilson, it might be an entire different ballgame. But with A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill is a little bit at fault there for some of those inconsistencies. But I talked about that quite a bit this offseason and told you those inconsistencies could come up quite a bit. At number 11, Will Fuller, again, playing against Detroit. No Jeff Okudah, could give up the big plays. All of that, Will Fuller is a guy definitely could be a wide receiver 1 this week. Looking forward to watching him absolutely dismantle my Lions on Thanksgiving Day. You can tell that I'm not biased in any way because I'd rather see Will Fuller outperform or just absolutely go off on Thanksgiving Day than watching my Lions, keep him to a minimum. Maybe that doesn't make me a good fan. I don't care. I'm a fan of football. I like to see good players play well, and Will Fuller is one of those guys. Let's hop in to the top 10 now. At number 10, Michael Thomas. I'm not moving away from Michael Thomas, even with Taysom Hill. I know it concerns a lot of people. I am not falling for it right now, though. Still give me some Michael Thomas. DK Metcalf, talked about him a little bit when I talked about Tyler Lockett. Dude's a beast. You're still throwing him in your lineup. The dude is just, it's crazy. It's crazy how good he's been. I asked on Twitter this past week, for next, if you were drafting for next year right now, if you were currently holding your 2021 fantasy drafts, where does DK Metcalf go? And quite surprisingly, I gave about 5 options before DK Metcalf, but I said, honestly, I could see him as the wide receiver 3. There was a lot of responses that people would take him as a wide receiver 1 or 2 next year. That's pretty spicy. So let me ask you, Headliner Nation, in the comments below, if you were to do your 2021 fantasy drafts right now, what wide receiver off the board would DK Metcalf be? Would he be 1? Would he be 2? Would he be 3? Do you have him outside the top 5 wide receivers? Let me know in the comments below. Really interested to see what you have to say about that. And number 8, Adam Thielen. With Adam Thielen, we're kind of playing the waiting game right now. Yes, he tested positive for COVID. Yes, he has had a negative test since then. No, he has not been ruled out of Sunday's game. If he were to test negative every day leading up to Sunday, he could still play on Sunday. So I've got him in my top 10 right now at number 8, and I already told you why. The dude has been a beast in the red zone. At number 7, Calvin Ridley this week. Will he have no Julio Jones? Will he have Julio Jones? What will it be? The foot looks healthy. That's all that matters to me. If there's no Julio Jones, yeah, maybe the volume goes up a little bit and pushes Calvin Ridley a little bit higher. But regardless, we're starting him, right? At number 6, DeAndre Hopkins. Dude has been an absolute ball hog this year. Tons of volume going his way. Only thing about DeAndre Hopkins this week, it is New England. New England could hold that ceiling down just a little bit. And on top of that, how is Kyler Murray's shoulder? That's also concerning for me. And number 5, Terry McLaurin going up against Dallas. We know Dallas can give up some huge plays, right? One question about Terry McLaurin out of nowhere today, listed as questionable, dealing with a little bit of an injury. What does that do for Terry McLaurin in Sunday's game? But I said it in the start sit. He is my Manscaped must start. We need to start looking at Terry McLaurin as a true and tried wide receiver 1 because he's playing like it. Keenan Allen, number 4, going up against Buffalo. Love Keenan Allen this week. I really think, and we'll talk about Stephon Diggs at number 3 because I've got these guys right next to each other. They're playing each other. With these two teams, they're 4th and 5th in the NFL in most passing yards. I expect a dogfight. I expect these teams to go out and absolutely try to shred each other. Lots of passing yards, lots of volume, lot of fantasy points for Diggs and Allen. At number 2, Tyreek Hill. And number 1, Devontae Adams. Honestly, what else do you want me to say about him? What else do you want me to say about these two guys? There's not really anything to say at this point. Devontae Adams has been an absolute beast this year. And quite honestly, with Tyreek Hill, I'm surprised that there's not a whole lot of people talking about him as being he's a top-end wide receiver. That Twitter post that I told you about, when I mentioned Tyreek Hill, there was a lot of people who were like, oh, I'm taking DK Metcalf over Tyreek Hill. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. This is a guy that has 4 games this year with double-digit targets. He's got a touchdown in every single game this year, but 2. I mean, Tyreek Hill scores. We know who's getting the football for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's either Tyreek Hill or it's Travis Kelce. I mean, Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver 2 on the season right now. He's averaging over a full point per game more than what DK Metcalf is. But no one's really talking about Tyreek Hill. It just doesn't seem like it. When we talk about who are the top wide receivers in the league, Tyreek Hill's name just doesn't come up as much, and it's kind of odd. You've got the best quarterback in the league and one of the best offenses in the league and one of the friendliest offenses for him. To me, I mean, this is a guy that he's a top 2 for me every single week. The upside is just always there for him. Moving on, notable players. We got CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Jones, Tyler Boyd, Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, and Mike Williams. All of these guys are starts for me this week. They just fall outside that top 30 for different reasons. CeeDee Lamb, he is a start. But again, Washington, they do a good job of limiting some bigger plays, and that's where CeeDee Lamb is kind of making his money right now. So if that big play is limited from CeeDee Lamb this week and that volume continues to go towards Amari Cooper, is his upside really there? Marvin Jones Jr., they've got a lot of injuries right now. Kenny Galladay will be out again. DeAndre Swift is questionable. Danny Amendola is out again. So for Marvin Jones, he is a start for me. But to be honest with you, Matthew Stafford's hand is bothering him a little bit. TJ Hawkinson has been banged up. Obviously, the offensive line hasn't been great this year. There's just so many injuries. It's hard to expect a lot of upside from the Lions. So for Marvin Jones, it's kind of a score boomer bust type atmosphere. But because Kenny Galladay's out and he's one of the healthier players on this team, and they're going up against a defense that can give up some yards, you got to play Marvin Jones. He's still a start. Tyler Boyd could be trending down for me very soon. I decided to go with him over T. Higgins this week as a start, just because I think Tyler Boyd offers you a little bit more consistency. He's not going to be reliant on that big play the way T. Higgins might be. Jacoby Myers, yeah, he let us down last week, but he's been so consistent over the weeks before that. It's hard for me to just move on from Jacoby Myers. Last week we saw, other guys getting more targets than him that just haven't gotten those in a while. Why did that happen? I have no idea. Harry, Bird, White, all three of them were targeted more than Jacoby Myers, and I'm not sure why when Myers has been such a great part of the offense over the last several weeks. Hopefully they go back to him again this week. I am going to list him as a start again, but because we kind of saw New England move away from him a little bit last week, I'm just being cautious with it, limiting the upside. Nelson Aguilar, a threat to score every single time he touches the football. And he's been the wide receiver one for Derek Carr this year. He's not getting nearly enough love, which hurts because I've been talking about him, not really this offseason, but throughout the season, earlier on I said, hey, grab Nelson Aguilar. Things are looking good there. He's averaging just under 10 points a game in half PPR formats because he is a little bit more boomer bust. And again, that's why I'm kind of limiting that upside for him. And then Mike Williams there at the very end. And again, these guys are in no particular order. I'm just throwing out guys that are outside of my top 30 that are still starts for me, but maybe not inside that top 30 for different reasons. And for Mike Williams, he is definitely a guy that has the big play potential every single time. And you might say, hey, Kyle, you're saying this Buffalo-Los Angeles game might be one that blows the over, and these guys are going to be passing about a lot. Why would he not be higher for you? Since week 8, Mike Williams is the wide receiver 14, while Keenan Allen's the wide receiver 2. They've been really, really good with Justin Herbert, as I'm going to start calling him Justin Herbert. He's much more dignified now with that haircut. So we're going to move from Herbert to Herbert. But anyway, there's a guy there by the name of Jalen Guyton that is still getting some big play targets down the field. Not necessarily coming to fruition down the field, but he's getting those targets down the field. And that's why that limits Mike Williams' upside a little bit because, Jalen Guyton could get a couple of those targets where you're hoping, hey, Mike Williams gets them, he takes one to the house, but all of a sudden if they go towards Jalen Guyton, he might not have, as much upside we would like on a weekly basis. But there you have it. My top 30 wide receivers. Also some notable players to go with it. Hit that like button down below if you appreciate all the content. And leave a comment down below with my question of the video. I might start coming up with a question of the video to start asking to get your feedback and to see just how much attention you're paying to what I'm putting out there. So again, asking about DK Metcalf. If 2021 drafts were to take place right now, what wide receiver off the board is DK Metcalf for you? And as always, if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, hit that subscribe button. Closing in on 113,000 followers. My gosh, 13,000, that would be quite the drop. We're not there. We're at 113. So, Headliner Nation, appreciate y'all. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. I'll catch you on the next one. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey. Eat lots of ham, mashed potatoes, gravy, all the best. The 1.01 of Thanksgiving food. Stuffing. Make sure you get a lot of stuffing as well. Some pecan pie. Pecan, depending on where you're from. Pumpkin, all of that good stuff. Headliner Nation, peace out. Have a good one. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. I'll see you on the next episode.